Hey, okay, what up, y'all? Missy Elliott. Let's talk about Miss Demeanor. Big fan, long time fan. This is the first song I ever heard of Missy's back in 98, 99. When this shit came on, to the MI. As soon as she said that shit, I remember I was like, who does that? Again, you know, now people do that skit with all that shit, Young Thug, Playboy Cardi. But a lot of people don't realize that Missy Elliott was kind of the whole start of that bullshit. And shout out to Missy doing that too, by the way. I say bullshit, but it's ill. Like, it works. Look, anything goes in rap. If it's ill, if it has charisma, you know what I'm saying? Let's switch this instrumental for a sec. As long as you have charisma, you can pull off anything. You can you know, if it works, if you have the charisma and the mic presence for it and the creativity for it. But if you don't have it, then it don't work for you. That's just what it is, man. Anyway, so let's go into the history of Missy a bit for me. So She's a Bitch comes out. I managed to hear it. Now, I'm going to go on a little tangent, by the way, here, because I lived in Saudi Arabia at the time. And I think people don't remember that music wasn't as easy to find as it is now. And I'm pretty sure that was the case in a lot of places, not just in Saudi Arabia, but especially in the Middle East. Because in the Middle East, at least where I was at in Saudi, music sites were blocked. So I wasn't able to just listen to music like that. I had to really dig for shit. That's probably why I'm so passionate about this rap shit, because I really had to be out here on some like, let me try to find a site that's not blocked, that, you know, is credible, that has something. And like, that shit was tough. It was playing whack-a-mole and shit like that. You'd find a site, it would give you some music, then it would get blocked, right? Not to talk about the fact that Wikipedia shit didn't exist. So a lot of times you're listening to these songs with no context, but you're just listening to them because they're dope. And I think that's the big disappointment I have with new school guys and their artists and their fans. It's like, they brag about not knowing a certain record or not knowing a certain artist's stuff, and I'm just going like, holy shit, like, you literally can be like, Siri, play Jeru the Damager, and Siri will play everything about Jeru the Damager for you. Like, it is so easy. It is literally at your fingertips to find music, when for a lot of us it wasn't. So there's no fucking excuse. Honestly, come on. Really. Like, you should even be a bigger hip-hop fan than I was because of all this stuff that's available to you. On the flip side, I will say, though, that one thing that is unfortunate for the younger heads that I think is different from us is that obviously they're flooded with garbage. Like, you guys are flooded with material, most of it being mediocre as fuck, if not flat out garbage. And that was just not what it was for us. We were not flooded, at least I wasn't. I remember there was a time when it started to be like, okay, we're getting a lot of fucking music now, but you know, for the most part, when I was growing up, like, there wasn't too much music out. It was just the right amount, you know what I'm saying? Like, people didn't flood and were like, we gotta drop this and we gotta drop this. Like, I think some of the new cats, they get sort of, you know, confused because there's a lot of stuff dropping and it's disposable to them because it was disposable to the artist making it, right? So, you know, I just want to say that as a caveat. I understand where they're coming from in that regard, but still, come on, you have Wikipedia, you got YouTube, you can find out anything you want about this rap shit if you give a fuck. But the reality is that most of you don't give a fuck. So, Missy, I hear this shit back in 99 or whatever. I loved it. It's the first song of hers I ever liked, that I even ever heard. And I didn't even know that Timbaland had did the beat at the time, even though I'd heard Timbaland like maybe a year earlier or so. And I was a massive Timbaland fan. I still am. I love Timbaland. He's like top 3 for me easily. You know, it's hard to really sort of put into context what Timbaland did. But honestly, like, Timbaland, when he was doing his shit in the 90s and in the early 2000s as well, it was kind of like, who is this motherfucker? Like, he was making beats that were just like, what is this shit? And they were ill. Like, they were great. Not like, what is this shit? This sucks. Like, not like that. You know what I'm saying? It takes some real talent in the midst of all the great shit that's going on for a guy like Timbaland to just be like, even next level and stand out, right? So, Missy and Timbaland were a duo. They were something to be, you know, a force to be reckoned with, I would say. And the way that Missy, in fact, from what I understand, helped Timbaland discover his sound and kind of like, you know, hip him on to like sort of what they were doing in Memphis and shit like that, right? So, I give Missy all the credit in the world. And the reality is that a lot of people don't give Missy her credit. I think she's got a ton of sons and daughters out here. I think modern rap in a lot of ways is basically a watered down version of what Missy Elliott was doing. Real talk. You look at all that shit. Lil Wayne is a Missy Elliott baby. You know what I'm saying? And all these guys are copying, Lil Wayne. So there you go. Like, there's a lot of sons and daughters of this fucking Missy Elliott shit, man. J. Cole, when he was coming out with his trash ass, was rapping on, Missy Elliott instrumentals and looking for that Timbaland cosign. Even now he's dropped an album, Amari or whatever, talking about that Timbaland cosign. It's still going. When Drake came out with Timbaland, he was working with Timbaland early in the days and things like that. So Missy Elliott and Timbaland have fathered a lot of fucking people out here, man. Like, and they don't really get the props for it, but let's be fucking honest. All that, like, the trap, all this shit that people are doing, and with the skirt back, all that, that's Missy. Missy been doing that, okay? So, Missy comes out with, She's a Bitch. To me, I first hear it. And then, I think I was, like, watching Italian TV back in Saudi, again, one of the few channels that we could get at the time. And I think All My Grill with MC Solar. That was the very first time I saw MC Solar. And I liked the song. I didn't love it as much as She's a Bitch, but I liked it. And that was kind of all I heard from Missy. Until, luckily enough, we were able to get MTV. And I got MTV at the right time because I think that's when she drops, Get Your Freak On. I love that shit. And so, Get Your Freak On, crazy beat. And crazy song in general, I'm loving it. And then towards the end, this shit kicks in, right? I didn't know it was a separate song at the time, but I just thought it was a continuation of Get Your Freak On. And I fucking loved Lick Shots, man. And I was just like, fuck, I gotta buy this album. And that was the first album I owned, and of Missy's, I would say. And I've been a real big fan ever since I bought her shit. So, I love Missy, man. And Missy was one of those people that changed her sound up like every album. It was really wild when you think about it now, because she was getting bit, right? You look at The Rain and the shit that she was coming out on her first album with Supa Dupa Fly, which, by the way, to me is one of the best Southern rap albums ever made. She comes out with that, and then people start duping the sound, right? You hear Wyclef, no. People are doing certain shit that starts to make you think, oh, this is Timbaland Missy shit. So then she's like, fuck that, I'm gonna change my sound up, and she comes out with Hot Boys and She's a Bitch and just goes darker and edgier with it. People start doing that shit. Then she goes to Get Your Freak On some, like, spaceship futuristic vibes. People start copying that shit, and then she, brings it back to the old school with Work It, and then people start copying that shit. So Missy's always been ahead of the fucking curve, and I rate Missy for that shit. Now, like anyone who's ahead of the curve, you have to understand that Missy, she was popular, but she was not as popular as she is now, in my opinion. A lot of that stuff is respect that people give her now, which is great. It's great for her to get her flowers. Because I remember when people were made fun of Missy and were like, oh, Missy sucks, and, her shit is too weird, or what is this garbage, and shit like that. Hip-hop heads, so-called hip-hop heads, were hating on Missy Elliott. And Missy Elliott herself will tell you that. I've looked at her Twitter. Music critics were like, nah, this is garbage, this don't make sense, her videos are stupid, all that shit. And now we look at Missy as being a fucking genius. And so my point is, don't listen to these casuals, and don't listen to people who are afraid to be themselves. You know what I'm saying? Who are afraid of innovation, and who are afraid of doing something unique and interesting. Those people, they'll catch up. Those are sheep. Don't worry about what sheep want. Do what you gotta do. Because the sheep will come around, and then they'll ride your dick and pretend that, they were always hip to it when they weren't. But by then it wouldn't even matter. You know what I'm saying? So that's my lesson for the day. I want to see, before I end this, if there's anything else I want to mention. I got my notes here. Missy, obviously, is my favorite of all the female rappers ever, personally. Not to, necessarily put female rap in a certain box, but I do think that female rap, and I like female rap, is its own thing to a certain degree. It's its own energy, and I like it for what it is. I'm a big believer in, well, anyone should be able to rap that has the talent for it. I don't understand dudes that can't listen to, women speak and women make hip-hop. They can totally make hip-hop and be dope at it. So I do think that Missy is, of the bunch, is my favorite personally. I love a lot of other female rappers as well, and Missy's better than a lot of male rappers. Her catalog destroys a lot of male rappers. Like, you know, her shit it's innovative, man. Like, it's very smart too, and it's put together really well. So much love to Missy, man. Top 10. Now, this I would say was actually a little bit easier for me because I do think that Missy Elliott was great. Her singles were great. I think her albums, they were good, but you get the sense that she was experimenting every album. Like I said, she was changing her sound because people were, you know, they were jacking and they were biting. So she was sort of exploring sound a lot. So my point is, I think you get the sense that when you listen to her albums that she was kind of like experimenting on one album and just doing like permutations of that sound, and then the next one would be a different sound, permutations of that sound. So what I'm trying to say is that I don't think the albums as a whole were necessarily the strongest. And that's no disrespect to Missy at all, because she would have like half the album would be crazy, or at least like 3-4 songs would be amazing, and then the others would be cool, like they're alright, but they weren't like amazing songs necessarily. So that's why for me it's easy to kind of pick and say, okay, for me personally, my favorite of the bunch. Like, I came to my top 8 very quickly, and then after that it was like a little bit tougher to round it out to the 10. But make no mistake, Missy Elliott has way more than 10 bangers. Like, Missy Elliott probably got like 20, 30 undeniable bangers out here. So let's start with my top 10, and this is in no order. She's a Bitch, obviously, number 1. In fact, look, man, She's a Bitch is so ahead of the fucking curve, like I was telling you, that fucking Ski Mask, Slump God, rapped on that, on the same fucking beat, 20 years later, the same beat, and, you know, started his career based off that record. I mean, he's nowhere now, and that song is trash, that whatever, I think Catch Me Outside, shit was horrible. But the fact of the matter is that that dude, and that's a new nigga, that's a new style, he came in and rapped on the exact same fucking beat and made it. That's how you know someone is ahead of their curve. So, She's a Bitch, The Rain, Best Friends, Hot Boys Remix, Lick Shots, Work It, Gossip Folks, On and On, 1 Minute Man, Get Your Freak On. I think that's a top 10 for me. So, listen, all this shit is, you know, great with Missy, and these are all joints. Give Missy her love, her flowers. You know, she's active on Twitter, and she seems like a really cool person, honestly. So, you know, I'll always be bumping her shit, man. Peace.